All right, welcome back, everybody. Same training, but a new voice this time. This is Mike Hamilton here. Officially, I'm the VP of Product Evangelism here at Madcap Software, and I will be picking up right where Jennifer left off. Now, before we start, in case you're just joining us, maybe you did the first session on day one, and then you're doing it on So before we start, you should have completed the first video with Jennifer Morse. You should now have a Flare project named Cities, and we will just pick up right where Jennifer left off. If those aren't true statements, then go ahead and go back and review the first video in this training series first. But we're going to pick up with content. Jennifer introduced Flare, the product, the concepts behind it, the concept of projects, how do you create a Flare project, and you guys all should have opened that Cities project that we will be working on. Well, now that you have a Flare project, we're going to go to the next phase. How do we get content? In other words, topics. How do we get these topic files into the Flare project? How do we create topics? How do we edit topics? How do we update topics? And then also, are there ways that we can do bulk imports for topics as well? So we have a lot to cover here. All right, now just in case you aren't doing these two videos back to back, in case you did one yesterday and now you're starting up again, we are going to start by pulling up our Flare project. Now, I happen to have it open already, but if you did close it out, not a big deal. Now, with Jennifer, she taught you how to download those training files, how to go to the File tab, click Open, go navigate. You don't have to do that anymore. If you need to reopen a Flare project that you have worked on recently, then right here on the Start page, there should be a list of recent Flare projects. And there I can see Cities right there at the top of the list. So all you have to do is click on Cities, and Flare will reopen that Cities project that you were working on. Now, if you already have that Cities project open, if over here on the left, you can, the Content Explorer, you can see the folders Africa, Asia, Europe, etc. Well, then you're all set. Everything is already open and ready to go. All right, so we are going to pick up with adding content, but before we actually add any content, I do want to briefly discuss this concept of topics. Now, I know with Jennifer, she did the slideshow, she graphically talked about this concept of topics. It's not like a Word document anymore. It's not this big linear document with hundreds of pages. Each individual procedure is now going to be its own little file. But it's not as random as people might think. In fact, if we open up our training manual to the section Adding Content, well, the very first page, there's a brief discussion about topics. And it's not just randomly splitting up content. A perfect topic is a balance. It's as small as possible, and that way we can maximize our reuse capabilities. But at the same time, we don't ever want it to be so small that it's a fragment. A topic needs to be a complete, full communication. So we don't want a topic that's half of a procedure, and we don't want a topic that includes 3 procedures. A single topic would be a single complete procedure. Or the way that the training manual puts it, a topic should answer a very specific question. What is the purpose for this topic to exist? What does it communicate? Well, it needs to communicate that in a complete fashion. All right, so enough of that. When we create our topics, we're going to be adding content. Now, when a lot of people think of content, they think text, but that can also be things like images and videos. Now, we are not going to veer off into a whole new level of training, but we're going to just take a few moments to point out that when you purchased a copy of Flare, it came with no extra charge, 2 additional applications, and they're both for multimedia. You received Madcap Capture for working with still images, and you received Madcap Mimic for working with movie files, training videos, things of that nature. Now, I bring this up only because the moment people hear that, they roll their eyes and they think, oh my gosh, the industry already has 50 screen capture tools. Do we really need another one? Well, that answer is it depends. If you just need static screenshots, then no, you can pretend these tools don't exist. Use whatever tool you want. What's unique about these two tools is how tightly they integrate with the Flare authoring tool, even down to the level of reusing metadata, the conditional markers, the variables. Now, I realize we haven't covered that in detail yet, but hopefully you have an idea. And I'm very quickly going to demonstrate what I'm talking about here. So let me move this training manual out of the way. And momentarily, now you guys can keep your cities project open. I'm going to minimize my cities project, and I'm going to bring up a demonstration Flare project that I have. Now, in this demonstration project, I have a topic. It has a screenshot in it that was taken with Madcap Capture. And you'll notice that somebody has put some text in a callout bubble, and that is embedded in the pixels of that JPEG. Well, no big deal. So far, so good. Well, except if you look at that heading 1 text, the word company has this strange gray background. Well, you'll find in the next couple of videos that that is a variable. So that means I can tailor this content when I publish. When I publish for Company A, it can say Company A products. And when I publish for Company B, it could say Company B products. Well, except that just ruined the call out in my screenshot. Actually it didn't. That is what I mean by how tightly these two tools can communicate. With Madcap Capture, we can embed that same variable code inside the callout, inside the screenshot that we have in our heading 1. And we can even test it live. If I go to the preview, I can preview as any of my production documents. And this is kind of a scary project. I've got a lot of them here. But if I preview for my partner, XYZ Corporation, then I can have Flare do a quick 1-page render. And after it does that 1-page render, you will see that the heading 1 has been updated, XYZ Corporation products. But Flare was able to reach into the pixels of a JPEG and update the text callout as well. And this is one of those things where as soon as you saw that, you either went, oh my gosh, we need that. Then guess what? You need to use that Madcap Capture tool. And if when I did that, you said, yeah, we would never do that, then keep using whatever screenshot tool you want. So that's really kind of the dividing line there. So if I hop out to my desktop very quickly, these are those two tools, Madcap Capture and Madcap Mimic. Now, if you have a copy of Flare, but you don't have those two tools, then whoever did the installation for you, you need to call them back. When you received your link to download the Flare application, it also included links to download and install the 2 multimedia applications. All right, so enough of that. we're not going to go off on a tangent. I did just want to introduce those because a lot of people are confused. Why do they even exist? Well, we've broken that media barrier. We can now use the conditions and the variables even inside of the media files. All right, so enough of that. Now we're going to go back into our cities project, and we're going to create our first topic together. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up that cities project again. To open up a new topic or to create a new topic, we're just going to go to the File tab. From the File tab, select New. This is the same process to add any file type you want to a new Flare project. Now, when the Add File dialog opens, it will default to adding a new topic because that's what we do most of the time. The next thing down, there is a list of templates that we can choose from. We're going to keep things this simple. We're just going to choose the new topic built-in template. Once we've chosen the template, well, now folder. What folder do we want this new topic to be created in? Now, when I opened this dialog, I had the Europe folder selected, so Flare automatically populated that folder. Well, that's actually incorrect. I want this new topic to be created in the folder labeled North America. So to change that, there's a little Browse button to the right of that field. I'll click that Browse button, select the folder that I want, in this case, North America, and click OK. And now, file name. If you haven't caught on, the name of our project is Cities. Basically, we're building a policy and procedure guide for a travel company. And one of the cities that we need to document some information about is San Francisco. So I'll type the name San Francisco, and then we're all set. We click the Add button in the lower right corner of the dialog, and congratulations, we have just created our first Flare project. So creating projects, it's super easy. You can create tens, hundreds, thousands of topics that way. All right, so if they're easy to create, how easy are they to update or edit? Well, you can treat it just like a word processor. Now, again, the next section in your training manual, it has the subheading Changing a Topic, and we're going to go ahead and add these two paragraphs that I've just highlighted to this San Francisco topic. So let me slide this back out of the way. We'll get the editor back. I'll highlight my text here, and I'll go ahead and I'll type those two paragraphs. Gotta love trying to type when people are watching. All right, so now we have a couple of paragraphs, and if you need to pause for a second, just go ahead and hit pause and get that typed in. But now that we have a couple of paragraphs of content, well, now we have something that we can work with. And before I go too much farther, I want to explain a little bit about the Flare editor itself. Now, in your training manual, there is now several pages, this big table that will walk you through all of the individual little icons, what every single one of them does. So because you have that reference, we're not going to do that here. I would just put you to sleep most likely. But I do want to talk about the editor itself. Because everything is XML based, the Flare editor is going to do some things that you may not be used to. And we actually have some people submit these as bug reports. It's like, these aren't bugs. This is the editor communicating, trying to tell you unique features or attributes about the XML code underneath the page. So as an example, now what I'm about to do is not correct. If marketing wants proper names to be bold, well, then I should highlight the name, and we should have a proper style that we could apply to achieve that bold attribute. But just for training value, I am going to click the bold button here. Again, in the real world, I would try to avoid doing this. It's much better to do something like this with a proper style. But I just need some modified content for demonstration purposes. Now, I'm going to put the cursor in the word the, and hopefully this comes through the recording. It's just a standard blinking vertical normal looking cursor. However, if I hit my right arrow key just a couple of times, things are going to change when I get in front of the capital letter P. Suddenly that cursor, it just grew little legs. And those legs are pointing at the normal text. Well, that's not a bug. That is Flare trying to communicate to you, the author, that yes, you are in front of the letter P, but as far as the XML code goes, you have not yet entered that bold attribute. So if you start typing right now, you just get normal text. Now, if I undo that normal text, well, now if I move that cursor just 1 pixel to the right, well, guess what? I'm still in front of the letter P, but now those little legs are pointing towards the bold text. Well, that means I have now entered that bold attribute. And now if I start typing, well, we get bold text. So something just as subtle as these little directional legs on the cursor, it's intentional. That's the Flare editor communicating. And there are lots of little things you might run into. We're not going to take the time to show them all, but there are several documented on the next few pages of your training manual. What we are going to do, though, is now I want to talk about these vertical bars over here in my left margin. And you may not even see those in your interface. You might just have an interface that just looks like this. So what am I even talking about here? Well, first, how do we make them visible? On the lower toolbar, there is a little icon here. I'll put a circle around it. It looks like a blue vertical bar with some simulated text next to it. That button is a toggle that will show or hide the vertical structure bars. So let me go ahead and click on that icon, and now my vertical structure bars are visible in my left margin. And if you have heard people talking about, the power of document structure in XML, well, that's what this is talking about. This lets me see the code level structure of this page that's happening behind the scenes, but without having to see an actual code view. And I can actually manipulate these code level elements. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, this is not a very real world example. It's just more a kind of mechanical practice. But if you can see that big H1, that heading 1 block, if I left click with my mouse and I hold the mouse button down, well, I can drag, and now wherever you see that blue arrow, Well, that is a location where I can legally drop that H1 element. It's legal and valid to drop in that location. And if I let go of my mouse, boom. So imagine a big complex table and being able to just drag and drop entire rows or entire columns without the table exploding. That's pretty cool. All right, so that was just kind of a practice, just mechanical. We want to put the page back the way it was. So this time we'll practice by the P block, the paragraph block. I'll left click on that, drag down. Again, I get that blue arrow. I can let go, and boom. Now our topic is back to the way it was. All right, so now we're going to go a little bit deeper. We're going to do some more content work, but we're actually going to switch to a new topic. Before we switch to a new topic, though, I want to go ahead and do a save. Now, how do I know that I need to do a save? Well, in our workspace, there's a little tab at the top, San Francisco. And right now you can see a little asterisk right there. Anytime you see that asterisk, it indicates that you have pending edits that have not been saved. Now, normally in Flare, the save icon is way up here at the top. Now, mine isn't. I actually moved mine. Now, let me put it back to where it normally is, so it should look the way yours does. So if you look at the very top left corner, well, there's a save and a save all, and then an undo and a redo, those 4 icons. Now, I don't like them being up in the corner. For me, that's a bit of a stretch for me to reach. I prefer them being directly above the Content Explorer. So how do I move them? Well, that's pretty easy. Right-click on any one of these icons, and then from the right-click menu, select Show Quick Access Toolbar below the ribbon. And boom, all those little icons just moved. All right, so now that they're easier for me to access, I am going to click on that Save All icon. Now, the next topic that we're going to edit is the Mexico City topic. Now, we're going to go ahead and open this North America folder, and we can spot check, hey, there's that San Francisco topic, so it created it in the exact folder we asked it to. But this time I want to edit the Mexico City topic. So I'll just double click on Mexico City. And now that topic will open in my editor on the right. Now, notice it didn't close San Francisco. There's now a second tab across the top of my workspace. I can go back to the San Francisco tab if I want to, or I can go to the Mexico City tab now. But if I scroll down to the bottom of Mexico City, at the very bottom, there is a list of boroughs, basically kind of communities, different neighborhoods in Mexico City. Well, we get some feedback from marketing, hey, we'd really like it if this was in a bulleted list. Okay, that's easy enough. All we have to do is using our mouse, select all of these cities, and with all of those lines selected, we now go to the Home tab. We want to make sure the Home ribbon is open, and then in the paragraph area, there's a little icon that shows a bullet list. Now, if I want more options, there's a little drop-down arrow. If I click that drop-down arrow, I can select bullet list, and there we go. It was that easy to just go from a list of text items to a bulleted list. Well, what about numbers? What if I want to do numbers instead? Well, let's go ahead, and before we move on, I see that little asterisk again, so let's do a save all. And now we're going to open the topic Lima. Now, if you're not familiar, Lima is the capital of Peru, So that's not going to be in the North America folder. That is going to be down in the South America folder. So I'll open South America, but this time I will double click on Lima. Now, if I scroll down under that image, there's a little section here that says the most populous municipalities in the Americas are, and then it lists 5 municipalities, starting with Sao Paulo and finishing with Bogota. Well, I'm going to go ahead and highlight all 5 of those, and very similar to how we did the bulleted list, I'll go up to that home ribbon paragraph area. I'll use that little drop down arrow again, but this time I'll go down and select numbered list. Boom, just as easy. So bulleted lists, numbered lists, nothing super difficult. All right, so what if we want to kick things up a notch? Rather than just text or numbers or bullets, let's go ahead and add some media. What if we want to add some graphics, some images? No problem. Flare's happy to let you use graphics of pretty much any format you want. However, I will caution, Flare will let you use more file formats than you probably should. My personal recommendation, and that's all this is not a mandate, I would try and stick with JPEG images if you have any digital photographs, maybe product photographs or anything you're documenting. If it's not a digital photograph, then I would prefer the PNG image format. Now, the reason I recommend those two, they're modern, they're very efficient size-wise, but more importantly, you'll never have any surprises. Those 2 image formats will work in every single file format that Flare can publish. If you start using some more exotic, image formats, you have to be careful. They might show up in something like a PDF, but then you publish HTML5 and suddenly you don't see any graphics. Well, if you use something like TIFF images, there are some web browsers that just won't display a TIFF image. So you have to be a little careful. Even though Flare will yet let you use it, doesn't mean it might be a good idea. All right, so the topic that we are going to edit, I'm just going to flip back over to that San Francisco tab. We never closed it. Now, if you did close that tab, well, we can always go back into the North America folder and then just double click on San Francisco and it will open back up again. But it looks like all of the other cities had a graphic underneath the heading 1. So we want to do that to San Francisco as well. So I'll put my cursor at the very end of the heading 1 and I'll press the Enter key just so that I get some extra space. With my cursor now blinking there on that empty line, this time I'm going to go to the Insert tab. I want to bring up the Insert ribbon. Now on the far left of the Insert ribbon, there's an Insert Image button. I'll click Insert Image, and that will bring up the Insert Image dialog. Now, if we have already used an image in our Flare project, well, then we can just recycle. This upper area, I could go into Resources and Images, and here are all of the current images already in our content library. So things like product logos, company logos, even if it shows up in 100 places, you only need to store it in your project once. You can just keep referencing it over and over. Now, since San Francisco was a brand new topic for us, we don't have any San Francisco images yet. So we're going to need to go outside of the Flare project and pull one in. To do that, we go down to the bottom of this navigation area, and there's one of those little browse buttons, little ellipsis button. If we click on that browse button, that is going to bring up just a standard, Windows file navigation interface. And now we need to navigate to wherever you stored the training files that you started with. Remember back when you started with Jennifer in the previous video? For me, I put them on my C drive. So I'm going to go to my C drive. Then I'm going to go into Flare Intro Training. And then there is a folder labeled Files. If I double click on Files, well, there are several graphics in here we can use, and one of them is labeled San Francisco. So I'll choose San Francisco and click Open. Once we get back to the Flare interface, well, now I get a nice preview. I can make sure, yes, this is the image that we want. But don't click OK yet. We are not quite ready for that. There's some extra information we need to add. Now, if you've ever opened a page in a web browser, and if there was a graphic on that page and you hovered your mouse over that graphic and a bit of text popped up, that was the screen tip. You can add your own screen tip text to any of your graphics. There's a field down here towards the bottom labeled screen tip. And in that screen tip field, we're just going to type Golden Gate Bridge. And we're still not done yet. Now, not everybody does this, but I would encourage and recommend it. I consider it a best practice. There is another field underneath that is labeled alternate text. This field is critical for people with visual disabilities. If somebody is using a screen reader, or perhaps they have a Braille reader plugged into their USB port, this is how the browser will communicate to somebody who can't see that graphic what its purpose is. Again, not everybody does that, but that's really kind of short-sighted, not to get all preachy. I would consider this a best practice. And I also will admit this is not my area of expertise. There are people who specialize in accessibility compliance, but the goal is, how would I describe this graphic to somebody who was unable to see it? How would I describe it over the phone if I was talking to a colleague? So in this alternate text field, I am going to use the same thing I used for the screen tip, Golden Gate Bridge, but then I'll type dash as viewed from San Francisco at noon. So that just verbally kind of describes what that image is all about. So now that we've chosen the graphic, we've added our screen tip, and then we've also added that alternate text, well, at this point, we can just click the OK button. Flare asks for permission to now copy it into the content library. That's important, so we will click OK. And we now have that image in our Flare project. Now, what about video? How hard is it to add video content? Almost identical to what we just did. So the topic that we're going to add some video to, it's back in the South America folder. Now, before we go though, let's go ahead and do a save all. We've made a few edits. So now I'm going to close the North America folder, and we'll open the South America folder. And this time we're going to go into the topic Santiago. So we'll double click and open that. We're going to put our cursor on that empty paragraph right below the heading 1. And instead of a static graphic, we're actually going to drop in a movie this time. As I said, very similar process though. We go to the Insert ribbon. Rather than Insert Image, to the right of that now, we'll click Insert Multimedia, and that will bring up the Insert Multimedia dialog. Now again, we don't have any media files in here for Santiago yet, so just like last time, we are going to need to use this little Browse button. We're going to need to scroll out somewhere to our hard drive, or navigate out somewhere on our hard drive and locate this video. So we'll click that Browse button. Again, I'm going to navigate out to my C drive. Once I'm on my C drive, I'll go to the Flare Intro Training folder, and then once again go into the Files subfolder. And there's just a single MP4 video file. I'll select that video and click Open. That will bring me back to the Flare dialog. I'll click OK. And once again, Flare is going to ask for permission to bring this media file in and make it part of the content library. So again, I will click OK. And now this little placeholder is dropped into my topic. Now, in the actual live editor, we won't see that video play. However, you can, if you want to do a quick spot check, all we have to do is do a Save All. And then in the top left corner of the Flare editor, there is a preview button. It looks like a white page with a magnifying glass. If we click on that preview button, Flare will render this one topic and display it in my web browser. And because the web browser can play the video, well, then we can see it play and do whatever testing that we need to do. So that's pretty cool. You can do that live preview whenever you want. All right, but now that I've seen it, I know it works. I'm going to close that little preview window. And now we're going to move on to tables. Now, adding a table into a Flare topic, it's, again, pretty easy. The topic that we're going to edit this time is for the city Toronto. Now, I'm going to go back to the North America folder. Once I've opened North America, I will double-click and open the Toronto topic. And if I scroll way down to the bottom, at the very bottom, it talks about the 5 most commonly used languages in Toronto. And it lists several languages and then how many native speakers that there are. Now, I'm actually going to deviate from the training manual just a little bit. What the training manual wants us to do, and you can always feel free to go back and do it this way later if you're, doing things live with me here. What the training manual wants, it wants us to go to the end of that heading 3 text, press the Enter key so we get a blank line, insert an empty table that is, X number of rows, X number of columns, and then in a very slow and tedious fashion, one by one, we will copy and paste all of those values one cell at a time. Who's got time for that? So I'm going to deviate from the training manual just a little bit. I'm actually going to hit the undo button. I'm going to get rid of that extra line that I added. And before we go to add the table, the one thing I'm going to do different, I'm going to highlight all of this content, starting with English and going down to 175,000. Now that I've highlighted that content, we're going to go to the Insert tab And where it says Insert Table, we're going to click on the upper half, the part that is a graphic showing the table. Once I've clicked on Insert Table, the Insert Table dialog will open. Now, table size, we want to go ahead and tell Flare what size table we want. So the number of columns that we want is 2. The number of rows that we want is 5. But this is critical. You always want a proper header row. And if you look at the content we highlighted, well, there's only 5 lines there. Where's this header row? For now, it's just going to be empty. But the reason I say it's so important, if we publish to PDF later, if this table ends up breaking across a page break without a proper header row, Flare will not be able to repeat the labels at the top of that table on the continuation page. So we always want to make sure to include a header row. Now, table caption, that is option. You can add a caption if you want. Summary, again, this is for accessibility. Tables can be very difficult for people using Braille devices or screen readers. So they are designed to actually read this summary first. Since we've already covered accessible functionality, I'll just point it out. This is where you would add that content. But now I want to talk about behavior, autofit. There are 3 options up here. The one that I don't recommend ever using, fixed column width. If you're only publishing to PDF and you will only ever publish to a single page size, that is the only time I would ever even consider a fixed column width setting. Now, years ago, I used to prefer autofit to contents. And my thinking was, well, that should give me the smallest table possible, and that will be a best fit if I'm publishing to web browsers on desktops and laptops, and then also tablets and smartphones. And to a point, that is true. I just ended up spending way too much time fighting with the style sheet. That almost works too good. It almost looks like it's like strangling your content. So what we're going to use today, we're going to choose autofit to window. That basically means the available space. In concert with that, we're going to come down here and set align to center. But since this is just a short little narrow table where it says autofit to window, I'm going to set my value to about 40%. So that should give me a relatively good sized table, but centered between my margins. Up to this point, this is exactly what is in the training manual. I thought I said I was going to deviate a little bit. Well, here's the deviation. Remember I had us pre-select the content? Well, we're going to come down here to where it says text to table. I don't want to have to copy and paste all this. Now the default is none. What if we try paragraphs? That's not really going to work. I want English, French, and Italian in the left column, and I want the numbers in the right. So that didn't work. Let's try commas. Okay, that didn't work either. Let's try tabs. Okay, that didn't work. All right, here is the trick. I'm going to go into other. But when you first select other and you look at the preview, nothing is happening. Well, I'm just going to get a little bit cheeky here. What is separating my text label from my numbers? A space. So underneath that radio button other, I'll put my cursor in there and I'm literally going to type a space character. Now look at my preview. That's exactly what we want. So now that I've done that, I can click the OK button, and boom, we now have our table. Now, again, this is not in the training manual, but since I told you to add that header row, I am going to go into that new header row, and on the left column, I'll type language, and on the right column, I'll type native speakers, just so we have some proper labels on that header row on our table. All right, we'll do a save all. And so up to this point, we've done a lot of creating and adding content. But now we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to do something a little bit different. What if we find a problem with content? Are there tools inside Flare to help me fix problems? Absolutely. Now, one of the problems we found, we had, a silly American author that didn't quite understand some spellings for some of these foreign countries. So what we want to do is go into the South America folder, and the topic that I'm going to open this time is the Bogota topic. Now, what the American author, the mistake they made, apparently they weren't familiar with some of the South American spellings, and when it came to Colombia, well, they spelled it with a U, the way that the American city is spelled. That is not correct at all. It should be Colombia, 2 O's. The problem is it looks like they've made that same mistake in several places. I'm not even sure how many. And I don't want to have to go through and proofread everything by hand. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put the cursor in the word Columbia, the one that's incorrectly spelled. Then we're going to go to the Home tab, open up the Home ribbon, and then way over on the right, there's a little yellow folder with a pair of binoculars. That's the Find and Replace tool. We'll click on Find and Replace, and Flare's going to open this little helper panel. Now under Find, because I had my cursor in the word Columbia, that automatically populated. Now if yours didn't, no big deal. You can just type in capital C Olumbia, or you could copy and paste from the topic. The correct spelling that we want replace with is Colombia, capital C Olombia. Now here's where you have to be careful. If I were to run this right now, notice that Find In is set to whole project. I don't want to do that because somewhere in the North America section, we might have that spelling of Columbia and we probably want to keep it. But we need it changed anywhere down here in the South America section. So instead of Find In Whole Project, I'm going to use the little drop down and I'm going to choose Documents in the Same Folder. So that means it's going to find and replace this Bogota topic and all of the other topics that are in the South America folder. So we can be fairly targeted with our Find and Replace. Now for file type, we're just going to go with all files. And your instinct might be conservative. Just click Find Next and Replace, and then Find Next. And you could do it that way. But I want to show that it's just as safe to do it all at once. So I'm going to go to the very bottom. And I'm just going to click Replace All. I'll click Yes on the dialog, and boom, it's that fast. But I didn't have to rely or trust on Flare doing it right. I get to spot check now. You see this little report at the bottom? This is every replacement that Flare just made. And if I want to spot check, I can just double click on that first line and it will highlight. Here's where the replacement was made. And if I double click on the second line, well, there was the second replacement. And I can just keep working my way through this little report and I can very quickly spot check every replacement. So that's pretty cool. All right, but we've done that. It's all good now. So this bottom little window, there's a little X on the right. I'll close that. And I don't need that find and replace window anymore. So in the top right corner, again, there's a little X. I will close that. All right, so one more kind of maintenance item, we also have to know about spell checking. Because no matter how good we are, we always want to do a quick spell check, before we do any production publishing. For this, we're going to open a new topic, still in South America, but we're going to open the Rio topic this time. Now, if I look down at the Rio topic, I've got some little red squiggly lines. So this is one type of spell check. This is the spell check while you type. A lot of people are used to this in their word processors. And you'll notice the word populace here. Well, somebody has spelled that incorrectly. If I right click on it though, well, here I can see all of the recommendations. These are all of the entries in the spell check dictionary. I can select the correct spelling with OUS at the end, and that little red squiggle goes away. So that is the spell check while you type functionality. However, sometimes you want to swing a bigger hammer. Maybe I plan on doing a production build tomorrow, and I want to do a global spell check on the entire Flare project. These little red squiggles, it's just not enough. Well, in that case, before we move on, let's do a save all. And now to literally do a global spell check, we're going to go up to the Tools tab. We want to bring up the Tools ribbon. And on the far left, there's a little button here that says Spell Check Window. We're going to check that option or click on that option. And again, that's going to open one of those little helper panels on the right. Now, this interface, it can confuse some new users. The key thing to remember is it's basically two parts. I'm going to draw a line here, and everything above the line, this will set up and run the global spell check. Everything below that little brown line, that is the results of the spell check. So we're going to start with those upper fields. Once we've run the spell check, then we will focus on these lower fields. All right, get my little scribbles out of there. So what do we want to spell check? You can be very targeted. You can say, I only want to search certain folders. I only want to search, open topics. But in our case, we are going to spell check the entire Flare project. But then there's another filter. Do I only want topics? Do I only want snippets? Do I just want to do, you can do by file type as well as by like folder or area. But once again, we're going to do all files. The problem with the spell check for training purposes, it's almost too fast. If we don't choose whole project and all files, then the recording may not even pick it up. So we've chosen everything possible. And now when I click this start button, you should see a green progress bar and it's gone. So it was literally that fast. But now we move to this lower part. And you almost see what looks like a spreadsheet down here. Well, this is the spell check report. Every one of these line items is something that did not match the spell check dictionary. So if I choose this first row, I get a little preview option up here, Mad Travel. Well, that's the name of our fictional company. It wasn't in the spell check dictionary, but it's spelled correctly, so we can teach it to the spell check dictionary. Over here on the right, I have two choices. I can have this update my global spell check dictionary, meaning that Mad Travel will now be in every spell check for every project I ever work on. Or I can be more selective and say, well, no, I only want this to apply to this one Flare project. So we're going to choose that project option, and then I'll click Add to Dictionary. And now Flare will not bother me with that phrase, Mad Travel, anymore. And we can just keep going through and working our way through until all of these entries are gone. So that's doing a global spell check on the entire Flare project. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close that spell check window now. Again, top right corner, little red X. And now one more little cleanup item. You may notice I'm getting a lot of these tabs open as we do all these different edits. Well, it's kind of tedious if I have to go through and close them all by hand. There's a shortcut for that. Choose the topic that you want Flare to open the next time you open for your next edit session. With that one open, just right-click on that tab and then select Close All but this. Flare will then automatically close the remaining tabs, and now you're safe to close your Flare project if you want to, go home for the evening. And when you open Flare tomorrow, it's going to open right back to that exact same spot. So you can pick up right where you left off. All right, so that's going to finish up the adding content chapter. But now we're going to switch and we're going to look at importing content. What if somebody gives me just bulk content and I need Flare to convert that to topics? Well, before we even jump in, conceptually, I want to talk about something. If you've ever used one of the older tools like RoboHelp or something like that, well, you're probably familiar with the idea of importing. However, with Flare, it's different. In a lot of those older tools, they would do what we call a one-shot import. You point the tool at, say, a Word document, you check a bunch of boxes on how you want it processed, and then you say, go, and it comes flying in. But I hope you made all the right choices because you only get one shot at it. And then if that same person gives you another Word document next month, I hope you memorized all your little settings during that import, because if you don't get them exactly the same again next time, it's not going to look right. So that is why in Flare we do import as a two-step process. So I apologize, I am not a graphic artist, but I'm going to subject you to my horrible little scribbles. But let's say I have a Word document here. And then over here on the right, I have my Flare project. And I want the contents of that Word document in my Flare project. Well, again, it's a two-step process in Flare. The first thing I have to do is I actually have to create a file in my Flare project. It is an import file. And this is important because this is going to permanently store all of my settings for importing and processing these Word documents. So creating the import file, that is step one. Once that's been created, I then use that file to then import that Microsoft Word document. Now that might seem like it's extra work, but the benefit comes in, well, what if that same person gives me another Word document next month? Everything's already configured. I can now bring in that next Word document right through that import file that I already have configured. And so if, Sally in engineering gave me a document this month, and then Sally in engineering gives me a document next month, I can just import it in seconds because I've already written all the processing rules for the way that Sally writes her Word documents. So step one, we create the import file. Step two is then doing the actual import. All right, so enough conceptual. Let's actually do it now. Now we're going to start not with a Word import, but with an HTML import. That was actually a little easier, a little faster. So to do an HTML file import into Flare, we're going to go to the File tab and select New. Again, step one, we need to add an import file. To do that, we need to add a new file. So File, New, and that will bring up the Add File dialog. Now it defaults to a topic. That's what we did last time, but that's not what we want this time. Well, that file type is a drop-down. Now in that big drop-down list, I have to scroll up a little bit, and what I want is an HTML import file. Now once I've chosen HTML import file, we'll come down here to file name at the bottom, and in your training manual, it says to name this San Diego. A little tip, I consider this kind of a best practice, but the whole purpose of this import file is to be able to reuse it again in the future. So I will add a little bit more information. I'm still going to call it San Diego, but I'm going to type dash from Larry on the web team. That way I know that if Larry on the web team ever gives me files again in the future, I can just recycle and reuse this existing set of import rules. So once I've named this, I'll click Add, and now we have an import file as part of our Flare project. Now for step two, we need to point this import file at the actual HTML pages we plan to import. Now, if I need to import an entire folder tree, hundreds and hundreds of HTML pages, well, then in the lower right, there's a yellow folder with a green plus. But in our case, we're only pulling in one, that San Diego HTML page. So we're just going to hit the button that just has a single green plus sign on it. Once I've clicked that green plus, I'll navigate out to my C drive, then to that Flare intro training folder, and then into the files folder. And there I will locate San Diego.htm. I click open, and now we see that HTML file listed as files to be imported. Now, before we go any further, I want to go way down to the bottom, and there's a little checkbox down here. We're going to remove that check. I'll explain why in a couple of minutes, but for now, just push the I believe button and remove that checkbox or that check mark. Next, we're going to go down to the Options tab. How do we want Flare to process this HTML file? Well, first, where do we want it to go? Right now, it says import to project folder. Well, that means instead of going into a folder, it would end up next to the home topic down here. Ooh, that's not what we want. San Diego is in North America, so we want it to go into the North America folder. So we're going to choose this second radio button, import to folder, and then over on the right, there's that little browse button. If I click browse, that will bring up our folder tree, and I can select North America and click OK. All right, now we want to be careful with this next checkbox. Import linked HTML files. Well, what does that mean? Well, let's say that this San Diego page that we are importing has a link to the Los Angeles page. If I don't check this box, then only the San Diego page will be imported, but we'll end up with a broken link that we have to fix later. If I check this box, well, not only will the San Diego page be imported, but even though I didn't ask for it, the Los Angeles page would also be imported so that the link would still work. But I'm going to end up getting more topics than I expected. So you have to be a little careful. I have seen some customers get shocked when they, go to import a file and check this box, and next thing you know, they've got 80 new topics. Well, they didn't realize that way down at the bottom of that page, there were, 79 links. So that's just one word of caution there. We're not going to check that box. And now finally, what about resources? Well, what do I mean? What if this San Diego page is linking to a style sheet for its look and feel? What if this San Diego page is referencing some graphics, some images? Do we want those graphics to be imported? Well, normally the answer is yes to that. So I am going to check import resources, but I am going to deviate from the training manual just a little bit. The training manual says keep existing structure. I'm not a fan of that. What that means is when this San Diego topic goes into the North America folder, well, any of its graphics would be in here as well. Its style sheet would be. I try to keep my folders nice and clean. I just want topics in there. I want things like style sheets and images to automatically go into the resources folder where I have an images library and a style. I want to keep that kind of Flare model. So we're going to choose to the project resources folder. That will keep everything nice and tidy. All right, now finally, you see this little checkbox down here? Well, this goes with the one I had you ignore earlier. So if we hop back to source files, remember this little checkbox on the bottom that I had you clear? It says link generated files to source files. What does that mean in English? Well, when we import this San Diego file, you can tell Flare, hey, watch that file. If anybody makes an edit to it, I want to know. So that's what this first little checkbox does. It tells Flare to constantly monitor that file. Well, now if we go to the Options tab, this little checkbox, re-import, well, this goes along with that first checkbox. This tells Flare if you detect an update to that file, then automatically import it again. Now, we don't want that to happen. We want to take control of this topic ourselves. If we see any typos, any grammar problems, we want to be able to fix those. So we don't want this to stay synchronized. So we're not going to use either of those two checkboxes. All right, so that was the discussion. It's much longer to describe than to actually do. At this point, we can do a save all. And now, how do we make the actual import happen? Pretty easy. We go up here to the local toolbar, and if I hover my mouse over the text import, it's actually a button that I can click on. So I will click on that word import. Flare will now process that topic. I get a nice preview. I can see exactly what it's going to look like. As long as I'm happy, I click accept, and boom, we now have a new topic in our Flare project. All right, and that is the process for importing an HTML document. And if you look over here in the North America folder, what popped in? Well, sure enough, we have a new topic now, San Diego. All right, so that was an HTML import. What we're going to do next is a Word document. This is probably the most popular import that most people do into Flare. Very similar process though. Step one, we need an import file. So we'll go to the File tab. From the File tab, select New. When the Add File dialog opens, we'll come over here to File Type, and instead of a topic, we'll use that little drop down, and what we want is an MS Word import file. Once we've chosen the MS Word import file, we need to come down here to File Name, and we have to give it a name. Now, according to the training manual, we want to name this Europe. But again, I try to name this over who is giving me content, who gave me this Word document. So I'm going to type Europe dash Sally. You know, maybe Sally's in marketing or in engineering or something. But I just want to name, okay, who is giving me this content? Again, I want to be able to reuse it in the future if Sally gives me any additional documents. So once I've filled out the naming conventions, we'll click the Add button. And then Flare is going to add that import file. So again, step one is now complete. Well, now we need to configure this. Now, if we look, we already have a Europe folder. I'll open that up. And so right now we have kind of a Europe overview page, and then we have Istanbul, London, and Moscow. What we're going to end up doing is whatever new topics are coming out of this Word document, we want them to end up in this Europe folder as well. So here where it says import to folder, I'll just put my cursor in this field. And then over on the far right, there's that little browse button again. I'll click browse and I'll select Europe and click OK. Now where it says add file, this is where we teach Flare, okay, where is this Word document? So I will click that add file button. Again, I want to navigate to my C drive, to Flare Intro Training, and then to that Files folder. And there's a Word document, Europe.docx. Once I've chosen that Word document, I will click Open. And then very briefly, Flare just did a quick scan. It was probably too fast to even see, but there was a brief little green progress bar. Right, at this point, I can just do a Save All, and then on the local toolbar, click Import. And now I get my preview. Now this is different than the HTML import. Since this might be a really long Word document, I can configure Flare to automatically parse this into smaller topics. And if I look at this list on the left, well, I can see one topic named Prague is going to be imported, and another topic named Dublin is going to be imported. Boy, that's pretty cool. It's almost like this is a training file or something. Well, that was almost too easy. Instead of accept, I am going to click this cancel button because I want to show you a little bit more about what's happening here. If we come down here to the Styles tab, here are all of the styles that were found in that Microsoft Word document. And by default, heading 1 has a check mark for starting new topics. So if we were to open that original Word document, well, Dublin, that was a heading 1 section, and Prague, that was a heading 1 section. Sometimes you need to go deeper than that. Maybe what constitutes a topic in your Word document might be a heading 2 section. Well, if that's the case, you can just check this box in the heading 2 row. Now, In our case, this is going to cause problems. But just to show you, you can do a test if you want to. I've checked the heading 2 row. I'll do a save all. And now if I click that import button again on the local toolbar, well, now I'm getting 4 topics, but it's breaking too small now. This is not good. Remember way back when we talked about topics, we don't want them to be fragments. Well, I've gone too small. They're becoming fragments now. So that is not good. I'll click this little cancel button. And I'm going to remove that checkbox where it says heading 2. All right, one last time, I'll do a save all, and I'll click import. Once again, I get my nice preview. I'm happy. Prague looks good. Dublin looks good. I'll click the accept button. And now if we look in our Europe folder, well, now I have a Prague topic and a Dublin topic. So we have successfully imported that content. That is going to go ahead and wrap up this particular video, this segment of the training. I'm going to go ahead and hand you back off to Jennifer. And Jennifer is going to pick up now with linking. Now that we have all these cool topics, how do we start connecting them together? Now, you haven't gotten rid of me completely yet. I will be back later for one of your later video modules. But for now, take it away, Jennifer.